And Andreas Krieg is an assistant professor at the Defence Studies Department at King's College London. Joins us now in the studio. Great to have you with us. We've got the Russian Foreign Minister saying there that he hopes eastern Aleppo, the situation will be resolved in the next 2 to 3 days, even as we're hearing of more artillery shells falling on the rebel-held areas, the besieged areas. I mean, what do you think does happen next in Aleppo?
I mean, there's no ceasefire yet. The fighting is still ongoing. And I think we have to understand this is an operation, a counterinsurgency operation, Russian style. I mean, you rightly compare it to the one in Chechnya back in the day. And we can compare it to 1982 when Hafez al-Assad was fighting a rebellion in the north in Hama, the Hama massacre. It's a counterinsurgency strategy of annihilation. You're basically trying to really smoke them out. You're trying not only to kill those who are fighting, but you're also killing those civilians who are supporting dissidents, supporting the rebels and the opposition, without complete disregard of international law, ethics and morals. So basically, until these areas are actually liberated in the Syrian eyes, which means all the fighters out, all those who are supporting them out, there will be no end of fighting.
So this evacuation that we were supposed to see some 5 hours ago of rebels and civilians in this small pocket, to what extent do you think the Syrian government, the Syrian forces were excluded from that deal? Because it hasn't happened.
It hasn't happened, actually. We can see from the reports that we see on the ground, it seems like the fighting is still ongoing and they're still being shot at. And I think a lot of people are and we haven't even seen the full scale of the atrocities committed yet, because I cannot see any way that the Russians, especially the Syrian and the Syrian army as well as the militias fighting with them, will just let them go and then regroup somewhere else to fight another day. It's about annihilation. You have to. That's what they're trying to do. They try to smoke them out, kill every single one of them, and that's why a lot of civilians have been killed as well, because they've been targeted under the suspicion that they have been rebels in the past and just laid down their weapons.
So these calls for UN observers to monitor any evacuation that does go down is going to fall on deaf ears.
Absolutely, but we have no way to scrutinise that. We have no way to monitor any of that retreat.
Once the Syrian forces have retaken Aleppo, which looks like an inevitable conclusion, or is already has already happened, where are they going to focus their sights next?
I mean, some commentators are saying they might move towards the west. The FSA-held territory around Idlib might be next. But I think if you look at the entire province of Idlib, there's a lot of different factions fighting there, and every little village might have their own military council and a different rebel group holding it. And they will keep hold of this, and it will be a completely different ballgame. The strategy that they've used to take over Aleppo will not be able to implement that in Idlib. And
of course, they needed the Russians. They needed the Russian air power to support their battle for Aleppo. Will they still have that? Is that guaranteed in the fight
That's
going
what it's
forward?
all about. It's all about what are the Russians doing. The Assad regime in itself has no stake in it. They have no cards to play if the Russians don't support them. And I think the Russians don't have a stomach for a much more long-term fight in Idlib, because there's nothing to be won anymore. It's about now trying to make sure that these spheres of influences that have been created in northern Syria, Turkey holding a pocket, Russia and Syria holding a pocket, the FSA holding a pocket, that these spheres of influences are being fortified. So we've seen yesterday that the Syrian army has laid down mines along this frontier, which kind of suggests to us that they're trying to really fortify these kind of boundaries that have been created now, without people moving across from one to the other.
So what's Russia's strategy here? What are we going to see from Russia going forward?
I think the Russians, there has been an understanding with the Turks that Russia will keep its influence in Syria, which means they will keep their operational base. They keep Syria as a forward operating base in the Middle East, because that's the last one they have. And they can continuously, because this war is going to continue for 5 years, even longer, unfortunately. In this time, Syria can still play the mediator, it can play the broker. It is a world power that if you want to solve anything in Syria, you have to speak to the Russians, and which for Putin, it comes very cheaply. This war is continuing. He can play a world leader without investing too much money into this war.
If we look at the broader sort of geopolitical wranglings that are going on, there have been suggestions that Russia might be trying to wrap this up before President-elect Donald Trump takes office. What are your feelings there?
Wrapping up is a very broad term. I think, yes, taking over Aleppo, that was the plan. They've achieved that objective. But moving forward, this is not the end of the war. No. Aleppo is not the end of the war. No. The war is going to continue. And Russia needs to now make sure that what they have conquered will be kept, because we've seen actually that ISIS, as soon as the Syrian regime is moving towards Aleppo, they had to move forces away from other areas, and ISIS was able to take back Palmyra, for example. So it's quite a hollow victory actually, which means don't take this for granted just because you've taken Aleppo that you can now keep it. So, I mean, this is all about now fortifying it, making sure you can keep it.
Andreas Krieg, very interesting indeed to speak to you. Thanks for joining us here on Set.